we see that Jesus has compassion. We hear this word over and over again in the Gospels when Jesus interacts with large groups of people. Well, individuals also. Where he's moved, he's personally moved. I mean, these days we have almost a science of this, how to move people. Political speechwriters, people in marketing and advertising, they know how to hit just the right notes to move a certain demographic of people. If you don't believe me, just look at the ads and the infomercials that have to do with starving children, abandoned animals, abused people around the world. A well-crafted science and art in order to move you from one place to another and release you from your money. This is now a well-oiled machine. But when Jesus interacts with people, there's no manipulation. He sees clearly who they are and who he is in their lives. And he also sees where he wants them to be. All of this is happening as Jesus' ministry continues to unfold. And as it unfolds, we see how our ministry unfolds. Because we are in the 21st century, a lot of little imperfect Jesuses out there to be Jesus wherever we are. And the crowds were stumbling around a little bit in the dark, just looking for leadership, looking for someone to articulate their needs, to articulate and to act upon what needed to be done so that their fears and anxieties and their sufferings would be ministered to. That's why they followed Jesus. He healed the sick, but he did more than that. He told them why and where and how this is happening to them. And all movements have to answer those questions. I was driving around the island a couple days ago, and I saw a lot of these new signs. They're not political signs. They're not real estate signs. They're from a group saying, no Amazon. Now, I don't know where you stand on this or not, but this is a good example of how people have feelings, people have ideas, and they're all individual in their own homes. And then they look for someone to articulate and organize them and bring to pass some kind of action. It happens all the time in America, especially, where these groups rise up locally and statewide and nationally. And when they do that, then they come to some focus of what a leader is. And in the very beginning, it can be very amorphous and fluid and shift around. But when Jesus spoke to the crowds that day, they were so moved by his healing and by the truth of his teaching that they began to follow him even when he, in a sense, ran away. He was tired and he needed time to himself, mainly to be with his disciples and to rest physically and emotionally, and also time to pray and meditate and be in communion with his Father. But even though his own personal needs were great, when they followed him, in a sense, acting out their own desperation, their own great need to have someone speak to them about their own lives, their own struggles, their own fears, their own anxieties, he had compassion on them again. Instead of saying, sorry, like a good psychologist or therapist, your 50 minutes is up. And we sometimes can feel like Christian ministry is pulling us out of our comfort zone, pulling us past what we thought our limits were, pushing us in directions and in places we didn't want to be. And we have compassion on our fellow disciples. We want to help them out. We have compassion on God's mission, and we want to fulfill it. So we push ourselves a little further. Maybe we let go of one or two things that are maybe a little selfish in order to invest more in God's mission. Maybe we sacrifice a little more. And maybe during that whole time we keep saying, I hope this is over soon. I'm getting tired of it. That's what Jesus said when he tried to go to a deserted place. But he had compassion on those who needed it. And I think your leadership has done that. They've had compassion on you. They've heard your call. They've listened to what you've said, what you feel, and they know you want to get together. And they worked hard to find a safe way to do so. We even have a 6-foot stick here as a sign of discipline, but maybe also as a sign of consequences. I don't know. But it's to keep you safe and to keep all of us safe. Having compassion on each other. Jesus today gives us a foreshadow. All of us know about foreshadowing in literature. But basically, if you can think of it more like this, you're walking away from the sun, the early sun in the morning comes up in the east, and as you're walking away from the sun, you cast a shadow in front of yourself. And the shadow does whatever you do, right? But it's always in front of you as you're walking away from the sun. And it casts identically the shadow of you wherever you go. Jesus is breaking bread today with the thousands. And it casts a shadow over the disciples, who will later remember this as the first time Jesus acted out a Eucharistic, a communion gesture. Matter of fact, theologians take this moment and the moment in Mark where Jesus feeds the 4,000, not counting the women and children, because back then they didn't count. And takes that and says, this informs what we understand to be the Lord's Last Supper. And not only that, after Jesus resurrected from the dead and appeared to the disciples who were walking on the road to Emmaus, and they couldn't see him, they couldn't hear him, they heard him, but they couldn't see that it was Jesus until he broke the bread and said the blessing, right? Then they recognized him. This was a lesson again about the power of Jesus present in the breaking of the bread. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds like our Eucharistic prayers, doesn't it? He said the blessing, broke the bread, and gave it to the disciples. Those are almost identical words, right? So the very, very early theologians in the first couple hundred years of Christianity, they made all these connections. Even as the scripture was beginning to be formed into a single compilation of books that we later call the Bible. This gesture of bread and fish has differences from the Last Supper, but it also has great similarities. And Jesus' mercy and compassion and wanting to minister to our needs is acted out today by the thousands, or acted out that day by the thousands. And so when they were to be sent home, which was a practical, rational, almost compassionate decision, right? Send them home so they can find something to eat. Go find something to eat. Jesus challenges the disciples, like he accepted the challenge himself, to go a little further. You give them something to eat. How many times has St. Martin's been in a position where we felt, this is all we can do. We can't do anymore. And some of us hear Jesus saying, no, you do more. You try to do a little better.